Oh, OnePlus. It's a company with good intentions at heart, but they've just been really easy to hate over the last 2 years with their weird marketing tactics. If you're not familiar with the sort of rocky past that OnePlus has, here's a quick TLDR. 2 years ago, OnePlus launched their first phone, the One. Aside from really confusing people with their strange math equations, OnePlus created a really good phone for $299. It was just damn near impossible to actually get because of the invite system. Well, the story last year with the OnePlus 2 was about the same. Great phone, slightly higher price, easier to get than before, but still tough for a while till they got rid of their invite system. Well, fast forward to today, and OnePlus has done something that I almost didn't think was possible, especially for a company like them. They made a sleek phone that has top of the line specs in just about every area that counts, and is able to compete neck and neck with the big dogs for about half the price of them. Now before I go any further, I just want to get something out of the way. I could review this phone and give it a handicap by adding "for the price" at the end of every opinion, but I'm not. For two reasons. One, because that's not what OnePlus is shooting for. They want to be seen as a serious competitor, so treating this phone any different is doing it a disservice. But two, because, spoiler alert, I really think the OnePlus 3 is not only one of the best phones you can buy for $399, but one of the best phones you can buy, period. The price just happens to be a bonus. The phone's not perfect, and it's not really the best in any particular category, and contrary to what the company wants you to believe, there were corners that were cut to meet this price. But come on, you knew that. The difference though is that this is towards the top of the pack in almost every single category, and the corners that were cut were the right ones. Cutting corners itself isn't bad. Cutting the right corners is what matters. So, the OnePlus 3 comes in one flavor. That's it. It's got a Snapdragon 820, Adreno 530, 6 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage that you can't add on to, an 8 megapixel selfie cam, 16 megapixel main camera with optical and electronic stabilization, fingerprint scanner, USB-C, 5.5 inch 1080p screen, full metal build, 3000 mAh sealed-in battery. I mean, you get the idea. Long story short, it meets every major checkbox that you can ask for in a phone. It doesn't have dual front-facing speakers, which I would really like coming from a Nexus 6P. It's also not waterproof, but everything major is here. On paper, OnePlus is at least hitting the status quo. Now, anyone can throw together a motherboard with some impressive specs and call it a phone, but how does it actually feel in the hand? Personally, I think the OnePlus 3 is one of the best feeling phones out there. I said in my initial impressions video that I wasn't really on the thin phone bandwagon, and I'm still not, but damn, this phone feels good in the hand. Little details that most people probably don't consciously notice, like the angle of the curves on the back and just the weight distribution, are really on point. The phone fits in your palm pretty well and really isn't heavier at one point versus any other. The reason I mention the weight is because of something that I like to call the pinky shelf, and it's that weird thing we do when we're trying to use our phone one-handed. Super weird to mention, but it makes the phone feel a lot more secure when you're trying to use it in one hand. Okay, let's get something else out of the way here. It is a totally metal phone, and yeah, it does kind of share some looks with HTC and Apple phones. But like I said in my initial impressions video,
oh my god, who the hell cares?
Who cares? Those are two companies that are known to make very high quality, sharp looking phones. And the saying goes, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, so I would take it as a compliment. Looking around the phone, on the right you've got a power button and the SIM tray. On the left is a volume rocker and what they call the alert slider. It basically lets you toggle between no notifications, some notifications that you allow, and all notifications. Initially I was kind of meh on it, but after spending over a month with this phone, I really enjoy having it. Super small convenience, but you really get used to it. Side note, I freaking love the clicky feel of the buttons. Super small detail, but it's so oddly enjoyable. Just listen. Alright, let's talk about software and performance. The phone ships with Oxygen OS, which is a custom version of Android 6.0.1 Marshmallow from OnePlus. It basically adds on to the user experience you get with a Nexus phone, but it stays completely out of the way and doesn't bog the phone down at all. You can quote me on this, but the OnePlus 3 is the fastest and smoothest phone I have ever used, period. Whether or not it'll stay that way, I don't know. But with 6 gigs of RAM, even if it's sort of restricted, this phone flies. In the month I've used this phone, I think I've experienced 2 lags, both of which were while I was playing Pokemon Go outside, in the sun, in 95-degree weather, while plugged into a portable charger. So basically, my phone was hot as hell. Even more impressive though, all I did was clear my apps and start Pokemon Go again because I want to be the very best that no one ever was, and it picked up smooth just like butter. Oxygen OS also gives you some customization on top of Android, like a dark mode, or the option to switch between on-screen or capacitive buttons, a couple gestures, and a few little things like that. Overall, welcome additions that need to be built into stock Android anyway. I especially love the little gestures for music playback when the screen is off. It's really nifty to be able to just draw an arrow on the screen to skip the tracks or swipe down with 2 fingers to play or pause. It's the little things like those that really add value to the user experience. I hope OnePlus can stay on top of the update game because that's my only major concern for this phone given their track record. I gotta say though, in the month and a half-ish since I've had this phone, I think OnePlus has pushed out 3 updates fixing real concerns that people are reporting. I get it, they're just patches, but it gives me faith going forward. The front-facing fingerprint scanner is super quick, mostly accurate. I'd recommend adding your thumb to it twice as 2 different fingers. It tends to miss when you're at an angle, but I can't really fault the phone for this since a front-facing fingerprint scanner is going to face a lot of different angles as compared to a rear one. It works most of the time, and it's super fast when it does, and it even doubles as a capacitive home button, which is a really nice touch, and I think all front-facing fingerprint scanners should have this. Real quick touch on the call quality since it is a phone. I know this is 2016. Caller said I sounded fine and so did they. I'd like a little more volume out of the earpiece for noisy environments, but in a normal area it's fine. The speakerphone is very okay. It uses the bottom mounted speaker. It's really not the loudest, but it just manages to cross the line for being good enough. So back to software, like you'd expect, I mean it chugs along about any game or app you can think of without a hitch, which it better considering it's got top tier specs and 6 gigs of RAM. Like I mentioned in the title of this video, this is easily the best Pokemon Go phone for anyone out there truly looking to be the very best. Apps stay loaded in the RAM longer than you probably need them to be, and they'll pick up right where you left off without really sacrificing any battery life or performance. Also, speaking of battery, this guy sits right about the middle of the pack. I've said it before and I'll say it again, my usage of a smartphone is probably a lot harder than most people. I've got 3 email accounts pulling down, a Facebook group chat that never seems to shut up, Snapchats from people, and texts throughout the day from my girlfriend just to name the day-to-day stuff. Now that Pokemon Go is out and I have even less of a social life than I did before, my poor phone would probably pull its hair out if it could. With just these typical functions of my phone, I'm able to pull off about 3.5 to 4 hours of screen on time. Very middle of the road, but also impressive considering the abuse it gets. What's even better is what I'd say is probably one of my favorite pieces to this phone, dash charging. I won't get into the nitty-gritty here, but in a nutshell, OnePlus says that they moved a few of the charging components typically found in or around the USB port to the actual wall plug itself. The end result is ridiculously fast charging that somehow doesn't manage to make your phone hot. I know a little bit about the technical way it happens and I can explain that in a different video. If you want to see that, just let me know in the comments. But I just like calling it magic, to be truthful with you. To be fair, it's almost 100% certain that this is some version of VOOC rapid charging from OnePlus's parent company, Oppo. But I really don't care where it came from because it's so damn fast. OnePlus claims you can get 63% charge in 30 minutes, and the freaky part is they're actually right. A lot of times when companies throw out these numbers, it's a little asterisk on it, because the only way in hell you're going to get that speed is if your phone is completely off and not being used while you're plugged in, which is just not normal for people to do. The one downside is that you do have to use the official dash charger and cable from OnePlus, or maybe a VOOC charger from Oppo. That's kind of rumored to work. But honestly, it works so well that I'm actually comfortable recommending and paying $30 for a charger that is built very nicely and works just stupid fast. And there's even a car charger to boot, which is super convenient. So overall, this is the best phone performance-wise that you can currently find. I noticed this in the first few weeks of using it, and I waited over a month to actually make the review because I wanted to make sure that honeymoon phase was over, and 2, I wanted to make sure that performance didn't change, and sure enough, this phone is just as fast today as it was on day 1. The last bit I want to touch on for performance quickly is the screen. I know a lot of people were making a big stink about it because it's 1080p and isn't the highest quality panel and whatever. You have to forgive me, but I don't care. Yeah, the screen's a lower resolution than a typical flagship. Yes, the air quote problems with it are there, but they're not really problems. At no point did I ever find myself wanting more pixels, and at no point was I not happy with the screen quality. It gets pretty dim if you need it to be, and decently bright outdoors. I wish it was a little brighter for outdoor usage, truthfully. I did find that the adaptive brightness is a little weird sometimes. It doesn't always, air quote, adapt to my environment, meaning the screen is sometimes way brighter than it actually needs to be, but it eventually does catch up to itself. I just noticed that as a kind of weird quirk. Alrighty, so let's talk camera. Like I mentioned in that spec dump earlier, it's got a 16 megapixel rear camera with both optical and electronic stabilization and an 8 megapixel selfie cam. Let's get the selfie cam out of the way real quick. It's nothing too fancy, but it does take some of the sharpest photos in a selfie cam I've seen. It's even got a nifty smile to capture feature. The popular thing to do anymore though is take a selfie within Snapchat and then you can save and post them. I've got two things to say on this. One, the quality is not as good in Snapchat as it would be on a dedicated camera app, but that's because Snapchat actually takes screenshots of a video viewfinder, so it can be ready to record or take a snap. And two, even though it does this, snaps are still crisper than you'll find on any iPhone and most other Android phones if it's not just for the resolution alone. The rear camera is somewhere that I was both disappointed and impressed with. I was disappointed because I came from a Nexus 6P, which I think takes better photos overall, especially low light, but I was impressed because the OnePlus 3 still takes really good photos and easily beats the pants off the 6P as far as the experience of taking pictures goes. If you can tell, I'm really big on user experience. Literally everything from opening the camera app to the viewfinder itself, to adjusting settings for your picture, to taking pictures and processing them are all just hands down better on the OnePlus 3. Need to open your camera quick? Just double tap the power button and boom, you're there. Need to take a picture? Tap the shutter button, boom, you're done, and it's processed. The 6P suffered a little here as it aged, and so far the OnePlus 3 just continues to kick ass. Overall picture quality is very good, and this is where the impressive part that I mentioned earlier comes in, because the phone costs $399 and it still manages to take very nice photos. During the day in good light, like most phones, it takes very sharp photos with decently balanced colors. Little saturated, but not overly so. Colors are still punchy, but just the right amount to look good to your eyes and not be outlandish. Night shots are fair, but there is a decent bit of grain as you lose light, and it tends to blow up light sources pretty badly and makes them look like a ball of fluff. In short, you can pull off some truly nice shots on this phone, like this one that was a literal point and shoot at my friend's wedding reception. And the gallery app is super simple, pretty, and offers a decent range of editing tools. It's a very respectable camera experience, and I really doubt you'll be disappointed. The camera app is simple and pretty, but still gives you the controls you probably want. Honestly, I think it's the gold standard of what a camera app should be. Other companies should probably compare theirs to it. Focusing is usually pretty quick and right where you want it. I do notice that during videos it tends to drift a little bit, like this slow-mo video. It's got a really hard time focusing on the gun while it's shooting, and that might just be because of the conditions, because it's bright, because it's a black object, which is already a struggle for a camera to focus on in the first place with all the moving parts and yada yada. But I don't know, it's just something that kind of bothered me because I wanted to take a cool slow motion video of a gun ejecting a shell and I couldn't even do that. Video is just good enough, and this is where some of the corners were cut. Stabilization does a very middle of the road job making sure that videos aren't too jumpy. More importantly for me though, it doesn't have that weird jelly-like effect that a lot of phones have been doing lately for some reason. Color accuracy is fair, with slightly punchier than real life colors just like the pictures, and it transitions from areas of different brightness pretty well. Audio quality from the videos could be better, I'm just gonna say that right now. It's not bad per se, but it's really not that great, just okay. I don't know if that's a hardware limitation or something that could be patched, but a little bit of improvement on that front would be really welcome. So it's not the best camera on a smartphone, but it's a really good one. I doubt you'll be disappointed, and it's a perfect example of what I said earlier when I said that OnePlus figured out how to cut the right corners. The last thing I want to touch on are just the minor day-to-day things you notice while using a phone for a while. First off, it feels really good in the hand and is just the right balance for me. I like a bigger screen but want smaller bezels on a phone and a tight build, all of which this has. It's also super thin but not too thin, with just the right angled curves along the back to fit in your palm well. I do wish that there wasn't a camera hump on the back, but I can forgive it seeing that almost any case you use for it is going to make up for it. The 2.5D glass on the front gives it just a slight curve at the edge that both looks really nice and feels really nice when you're using it. Headphone jack also puts out better than average audio quality as compared to other phones that I've used, which is honestly kind of weird for me to say. I know a thing or two about audio, but I'm not an audiophile per se. I also get a surprising amount of compliments on it from people asking what it is and saying that it's really sleek. They also find the rosewood case that I bought for it kind of charming too. Quick side note, I do like the rosewood case a lot. I just wish it was a tad thicker so I could be a little more confident knowing the camera glass isn't going to scratch. The single speaker on the bottom is surprisingly good in terms of sound quality and actual volume. Don't get me wrong, it's still a single speaker instead of two, and it's still facing in the wrong direction, aka not towards my face, but it's impressively loud and doesn't even crack at the highest volume. Lows have some decent sound to them, but they do lack a whole lot of pump. The mids and highs also sound pretty crisp, and they leave the quality of the music you're listening to intact. Here's a quick sample. The last thing I want to touch on is the user experience because I really value that. This phone has consistently offered the best and most pleasant user experience for me since I took the Nexus 6P out of the box. OnePlus managed to strike a balance between hardware specs and software customization that makes for one of the nicest phones to actually use on a daily basis. Apps are super quick to open, they stay in the background forever, and there is rarely, and I mean rarely, a performance hiccup on this thing. When there is, it immediately picks right back up where it left off. It offers just the right amount of customization to be useful, and it helps the phone feel more like your own while not offering too much to confuse the average Joe. If you couldn't tell, I really like this phone, which is shocking for me since I had nothing but trouble with my OnePlus 1. I returned it and skipped the OnePlus 2, and I even bashed the company a little bit after all the weird marketing stuff they did. The OnePlus 3 is OnePlus's way of saying as a company, hey, we grew up. Everything from the attention to detail on both hardware and software to the pre-applied screen protector that you get on the phone out of the box to the actual packaging itself. I really have a tough time finding a whole lot of reasons to tell people not to give this phone a chance. OnePlus hit a home run here. Do I wish it had a little bit better battery? Absolutely. Do I wish the camera was closer to the top dogs? Yes. Do I worry that they're still a pretty fresh company? Yes. Do I wish it had dual speakers on the front and a micro SD card? You're damn right I do. Don't mistake what I'm saying in this review. The OnePlus 3 is not really the best in any particular category, save for maybe performance. But think of it this way. When you're shopping for a car, do you shop for a car with just the best gas mileage or any particular feature, or do you factor in all the other pieces of the car? You've got to take a top-down approach and see what gets you the best value for your hard-earned cash. As of mid-2016, the OnePlus 3 is just without a doubt the best overall value you can get in a smartphone. $399 gets you a premium phone with just an awesome user experience, performance that flies, and checks nearly every major important box that a smartphone should have in 2016. The only thing left to see is if OnePlus can deliver timely software updates. Given how far they've come, I've got some hope for the future. I'll put it to you this way. If you need a phone, and this one's on your list, I've never been able to so easily recommend any phone as I have with this one.